in this episode, we are going to hit a big topic, those 3 a.m. wake ups that plague us, especially women. This was so problematic for me, more problematic than I thought it was until I corrected it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe my sleep was as disturbed as it was. And this wasn't always the case, but it was definitely when I was going through the turmoil of 2024. My parents died. I was faltering in my personal life. My business was taking a hit. I did not know what to do. I wanted to quit my business, or at least aspects of my business. I was waking up almost every night, somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m. Sometimes I was able to go back to sleep, but many times I was not able to go back to sleep. And you all know, if you are waking up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and you're not going back to sleep, that makes for a really long day. And just not feeling great. Like, even if I fell asleep at 8 or 9 o'clock, which was a lot of times was the case because I was awake so early, it just disturbed my entire circadian rhythm. And I thought that this was just going to be normal for me. I thought it was due to perimenopause. Like, oh, I better go get my female hormones checked. I better, my progesterone must be falling. And I tried to tie it to my menstrual cycle. Like, okay, where am I in my menstrual cycle? And sometimes this is the case, but a lot of times it's not. I couldn't link it. But what I did was I created my adrenal fatigue and adrenal exhaustion course. I figured out how to get my body out of that fight or flight. Because for me, it was a lot of cortisol dysregulation and nervous system dysregulation. This isn't always the case for every single person. For a lot of us, though, it is, and especially women. So this podcast episode is called Why You're Still Tired Even After a Good Night's Sleep, or you think you're getting a good night's sleep, or you're waking up at 3 a.m. and you know you're not getting a good night's sleep. So what is going on with sleep regulation? I want to preface this by saying I'm not a sleep expert. I don't have all the answers for every single sleep problem. My friend Molly Eastman, she knows a lot more about that. And her program, her podcast, her handle on Instagram is called Sleep is a Skill. So you can check her out. But there are a lot of things that you can fix. And I'll go into many different topics and why this may be happening to you. But as women, my goodness, our hormones can be tricky. They can be sensitive. I look back now at my life and I'm like, well, duh, no wonder I was waking up. I wasn't able to go back to sleep. There were so many things that I was doing that I wasn't aware of that was disrupting my sleep. So let's dive into those. But if you're listening on the podcast and not watching this on my YouTube channel, I really would appreciate a rating and review of the podcast, Optimal Metabolism. I haven't been quite as regular in 2025. So those ratings and reviews really help to boost the podcast. Or if this is really helpful for you, share it with a friend, share it with somebody you love who's not sleeping well, and they can gather this information, because there's a lot of junk information, a lot of, experts and natural health people who claim that they, know a lot about certain topics, but really they're just pointing you to supplements, or they're pointing you to some MLM. Like, that will be more in next week's episode, because we're going to do a deep dive into adrenal and cortisol. But this drives me crazy when people are just trying to make money off you and supplements and a regimen. So anyway, ratings and review help me immensely. Pass this episode along to people you know and love. Share it away, and try to give my Optimal Metabolism podcast a boost again. So fatigue, sleep quality, light biology, we're going to talk about all of that today. Women can get and this is for men too. I know a lot of men who don't sleep well, but their hormones just aren't as finicky as ours, especially as we transition through perimenopause and menopause. But you might still feel exhausted, even though you feel like you're doing everything right. You're taking those concepts that, you're implementing so many things and still faltering, whether it's sleep deprivation, it's your weight, it's your overall health. And we know if we're not sleeping well, our hormones are going to be a wreck, and it's going to be very, very hard to overcome insulin resistance and blood sugar dysregulation. All of these things tie in. So there's so many topics I'm excited to talk about in upcoming episodes, because all of it's finally clicking for me. I'm almost, I'll be 50 in half a year, and I'm like, oh, finally, I understand the whole hormone connection and the circadian biology. But so excited to talk about a lot of hot topics, which is why I came back to the podcast. I took a little break and really like that. And like I mentioned last week, if you were listening, doing more hot topics and Q&A style episodes, a little bit shorter episodes, little bite-sized bits, so you can take it and run with it, pass it along to other people, and a little bit less of guest experts, even though we will still be looking at bringing in some guest experts as well. But just because I do want to start off by saying, just because you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep doesn't mean that it's optimal, or you're getting the correct amounts of deep sleep, restorative sleep, REM sleep, REM sleep, light sleep. Like, I wear an Aura ring, and I've worn one for a really long time. I lost it last fall, so I was without one for a couple of months. I took a little break, but I wear an Aura ring, and I'm not saying that that's the end all be all. It's 100% accurate, because it's not, but it's usually pretty spot on when I know I haven't slept real well, or, something disrupts my early sleep, like before 2 a.m. when I typically get my deep sleep. Like, my kids are 21, 19, and 16. Two of them are at college, but if they're home and it's a weekend and I'm waiting for them to come home, or my husband gets home late from a flight from traveling, or whatever it is, my dog barks. That sometimes happens if she sees something. We live in the woods, and she sees something in the middle of the night, jolts me awake, and I can, my Aura ring is spot on. And I can always tell when that deep sleep has been disrupted. And typically, deep sleep is happening between 10 and 2 a.m. And again, of course, it's going to depend when you go to sleep, but deep sleep is happening primarily in the first half of sleep. And then REM sleep, or REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, dreaming, as you want, if you want to call it that, that's happening in the latter stages, early morning hours. Again, I'm not the expert on all of these different types of sleep, but typically that's what I see. That's what I see with myself. I get very little deep sleep after 2 a.m. I don't have a ton of REM sleep until 2 a.m. And then it's more so REM sleep from 2 a.m. until the time I get up in the morning. But just because you get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep doesn't mean it's always restorative. And of course, there are many things that can be going on, like sleep apnea or sleep disturbances, or other sleep things that are happening in the quality of your sleep that go beyond this podcast. But just be aware that if you're getting a lot of wake ups, or you snore, or you are a mouth breather, your mouth is hanging open while you sleep, all of those things can come into play. Just a little side note tip: if you are a mouth breather and you know that you're a mouth breather, your mouth falls open as soon as you fall asleep, you can simply use some mouth tape your mouth shut, and you'll get a much better sleep. You won't dry your mouth out, less cavities, better oral microbiome. My youngest son's been taping his mouth for several years because his falls open. He would get drool. I mean, we used to laugh at him because he'd have these we call them drool piles, like drool piles all over his bed. And, in the car, he'd have drool running down his face if he fell asleep in the car. But, before we knew that, or before I knew, I should say, that it wasn't optimal to have your mouth hanging open while you sleep. He never snored. He just had his mouth hanging open. So anyway, he uses mouth tape, and that has helped him significantly. So quality of sleep largely depends on your circadian hormones. So I'm going to beat this topic home. If you are not letting your melatonin take over, melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland in response to darkness. Although only about 5% is secreted by the pineal gland, you do have melatonin that's produced by the mitochondria, the vast majority of it throughout the day, but the kind that helps you to fall asleep, stay asleep, and have more restorative sleep, healing sleep, that's secreted by the pineal gland in response to darkness. So if you are not letting your environment get very dark at night, you are looking at screens, watching TV on your phone, watching movies, watching Netflix, getting that blue light into your eyes, you are not going to sleep as soundly and as deeply because you are not allowing that melatonin to take over. And then that dysregulates your cortisol because your melatonin is peaking when it shouldn't. And you just disrupt this beautiful balance of hormones because God set us up to rise with the sun, and the sun to increase our cortisol response, and these beautiful cascade of hormones throughout the day and this beautiful cascade of hormones throughout the night. We were not created to flip on lights after dark and watch Netflix and be on these smartphones that emit all this light to the wee hours of the night, video games, whatever, what. Even junk light that's coming in your bedroom. So we live out in the country in like a subdivision. It gets pretty dark here, but we live in a cul-de-sac, and there's a light at the end of our cul-de-sac that shines right into our bathroom. Our bathroom is connected to our master bedroom. And so we have put a blackout shade on there. So I'm like, that is disrupted. Like, I do not like that. But there's not a whole lot of light around us. We don't have, neighbors that are real close to us. But if you live in a big city, or you have lights coming in, like we just came back from Florida not too long ago, and we were in like an apartment kind of complex. We had this condo. We had this nice condo that we rented, but there was buildings all around us, and I had to hang towels. There was blinds on the windows, and we had a door that went out to a patio, and there was a blind there, but it did not block a lot of light. And these lights were on all night long. So I actually had to like take beach towels and hang them over. My husband's like, really? I'm like, it's not dark enough in here for me to sleep. So make sure your room is really dark, or you won't let that melatonin peak when it's supposed to peak. And if you fall asleep before 10 p.m., that helps with this whole hormonal cascade, and will let melatonin peak when it's supposed to, somewhere between 10 or 12 and 2 a.m. Same time that leptin is supposed to be peaking. So getting the cortisol melatonin rhythm right is step number one for better sleep. Now, I felt like, okay, I'm doing this. Like, I was wearing my blue blocking glasses to block blue light at night. I've never been a big TV watcher. Like, we literally hardly ever have our TV on. I will say that I was enamored and watched every single episode of The Chosen, but that was about it. And we sometimes have sporting events on, but I don't watch much TV. But I did have to be mindful of putting my phone down, putting my phone screen red after the sun went down, and wearing my blue light blocking glasses, even though I had LED free lights in my home. Like, they were, dimmer lights, but I still would wear my blue light blocking glasses. But I felt like I was still getting those 3 a.m. wake ups at least occasionally. This step helped a lot, but there was other things that I was doing that was causing those 3 a.m. wake ups. But that is step number one, getting the cortisol melatonin rhythm in sync. And this can transpire pretty quickly. It's not like it takes a whole year to get your cortisol back in balance. Like, for me, it was a couple of months, and that was much better. I retested my cortisol because my cortisol pattern was wonked out. It was flatlined. And within a couple of months of all the circadian stuff, I had a nice pattern back again. So the number one disruptor is artificial blue light, like I said, from our phones, TVs, LEDs, hijacks our melatonin secretion. So things that we can do that I already mentioned, we can use firelight at night. If you're not comfortable, we can light candles and use our fireplaces. If you're not comfortable with that, you can switch out your light bulbs for your LED light bulbs that are so bright and have so much blue light in them, for incandescent lights that have more infrared lights. And in the show notes, or if you're on YouTube, in the notes are my product recommendations. So there's recommendations for blue light blocking glasses. I recommend the orange toned before bed, the yellow tones more so for the daytime if you're on your computer a ton. But there's light bulb suggestions, there's blue light blocking glasses suggestions, but keeping the house dim at night, blue light blocking glasses on, and trying not to use overhead lights. Because even if the overhead lights are dimmer, it's kind of mimicking the sun. So the receptors in our eyes not only receive input from the brightness of the light, but they also, if it's overhead, that's more like, oh, like the receptors are perceiving it from overhead rather than the sides. And so it's more like, oh gosh, it's daytime, the bright light, bright sun out, and it's going to really dysregulate that cortisol response. So turning off overhead lights, keeping the house dim, blue light blocking glasses on is all super helpful. And I get it. Like my husband is really kind of stubborn about this stuff. And he's like, flick on the lights. I'll be in my bathroom with a really dim light, washing my face, getting ready for bed. And he just comes and flicks on the lights. And I'm like, ah, and he's like, geez, are you, a vampire or what? And so it can be, but I will say, like, even just a couple of minutes with that overhead light on makes a difference. It stops that melatonin secretion. So, I mean, I'm not trying to scare you or drive fear or fearmonger or anything, but I just want you to be aware, like going to the refrigerator, popping your refrigerator with all those bright LED lights for a couple of minutes, like that makes a difference with your cortisol secretion and your melatonin secretion. So there's ways around all of these things, like you can make your light bulb red inside your refrigerator. Again, I'm not trying to fearmonger, but I do want you to be aware that these things can make a difference. And if you know these things, you can sleep so much better, restore your health. Like I said before, it's very hard to heal from any disease process if you're not sleeping well. So what your light environment is, how it connects to your metabolism. This podcast is all about optimizing your metabolism and really just optimizing your health and going back to basics and going back to how God programmed us to live. We have, I was talking about those light receptors in our eyes, and they give our brain, eyes are basically an extension of the brain. So on all the light signals that are coming in, the different wavelengths, the brightness, all of those things are coming in and telling our brain what to do. So there's a master timekeeper in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. That's our master timekeeper that tells all our organs, there's thousands and thousands of processes going on in our body at all times, right? And when those processes are happening, makes a huge difference to your body. If they're misfiring or they're going off at the wrong times, there's inflammation and chaos, right? That all starts with light signaling coming in your eyes, telling that SCN what to do. That's why I talked last week so much about cortisol and sunrise and UVA rise, because those different light frequencies that come into the eyes tells the brain, this is what you should be doing at this time of the day. And if we ignore that, our body's just in chaos and cannot heal. And we can eat a perfect diet and do an exercise and do all these things and wonder what is missing. Why can't I feel better? Like, why isn't my health better? And usually it's because of your lighting, circadian rhythm, and things that are coming into play that are not optimizing that. So just be mindful of your light environment and know that a lot of blue light at night, like I was mentioning, just basically creates metabolic chaos. It also dysregulates blood sugar, Because if our cortisol, if we're getting a lot of blue light stimulation at night, and this goes for your children too, and I know they can be really stubborn about this. It's really hard to get blue light out of kids' environment at night. Start young. My kids are teenagers or, in their 20s, and it's a lot harder, once they have all of these. Again, we weren't a big TV family. It's like my boys like their Xbox, and it's like, okay, our Wi-Fi goes off at 10 o'clock, so they just have to be done. It's a lot easier to implement and instill these values in your kids when they're young. So, but establishing that blue light, no blue light at night, getting rid of the chaos is just going to set you up for so much more success. And I will come back to, I lost my train of thought there. But I'm sure it will come back to me here. But just know too that cortisol rhythm is especially fragile for women. Like I ran into this, right? I will talk more about this in a future episode about fasting and how that can dysregulate cortisol, because I saw this happen with me and I couldn't figure out why I was getting high morning blood sugars. Oh, I just remembered that's what I was talking about. The high blood sugars at night totally stems back to, or can very much stem back to, blue light at night. Blue light is going to increase cortisol. Cortisol makes you secrete blood sugar in response to the stress, because cortisol is a stress hormone. So you release blood sugar. You have higher blood sugars at night. They're going to be higher in the morning. You're going to dysregulate blood sugar. Your insulin is going to increase. So double whammy if you are under a lot or using a lot of blue light at night into the wee hours. Say you're sitting on your Xbox until 1 a.m. or watching Netflix till midnight. And don't get me wrong, we're all going to watch movies here and there, whatever. But that can dysregulate blood sugar, and you will feel like snacking and eating and wanting to take in more food because your cortisol stimulated and you're releasing blood sugar. And it's just this vicious circle. So people who consume a lot of blue light at night tend to consume more calories, especially at night, and they're eating and their blood sugar becomes more dysregulated. And lots of interesting studies that show eating outside under natural infrared light and the full spectrum of light helps you to uptake blood sugar, where, eating in front of your computer or your TV, not as good a blood sugar response, like poor blood sugar response when you do that. So that's what the thought that I remembered that I got sidetracked away from is blue light at night can definitely dysregulate the blood sugar too. So going back to how, our cortisol rhythm as women is just more fragile. And I overdid intermittent fasting. I still do timed eating. I still intermittent fast some days, but I don't stress about it. I don't say, oh, in my head, I can't eat until noon. Like I was just way too structured and rigid about it. And I did it in the morning. I fasted through, morning way too long. Like I did this for years. So yes, it helped me with my insulin resistance, and it helped me to recover from insulin resistance, and it helped my blood sugar at first. But then how I got tipped off to all of this cortisol dysregulation was high morning blood sugars, which made no sense to me whatsoever, because I'd been fasting for 18 to 20 hours and I was still getting high blood sugars. It was because my cortisol was dysregulated, because I was over fasting, because I wasn't paying attention to my light environment and all the things that I now talk about. And it takes a while to overcome and get back, into balance. But once you do, it's like, oh my gosh, wow, this actually works. So, I know that I'm talking to a lot of busy moms and caregivers, and maybe you're an overexerciser like I was. Clean eating, like you are consumed with clean eating, like, you don't divert from anything other than, whole natural food. And kudos to you for doing that. I'm very happy for you. But sometimes just all of this pressure and perfection and, needing to be our best all the time and be everything to everyone can really dysregulate our cortisol and burn us out overall. And then fasting throughout the morning all the time, being too rigid, all of these things can come into play with these with these sleeping issues and these middle of the night wake ups. So that was definitely coming into play for me. I was overdoing it. My mom was in hospice. My mom had just been diagnosed with cancer when I figured out I had high morning blood sugars, and I went through chemo treatments with her in hospice, and watched her die in hospice for a month. Like, that took a huge toll on me, and my blood sugars just kept getting worse, even though I was losing weight at that time and still intermittent fasting, thinking that it was helping me. So I definitely made some fasting mistakes, and I do have a guide called, oh, what is it called? Safe Fasting Guide for Women, or something along those lines, that I will link in the show notes, along with my other sleep guide, my 3 a.m. wake up guide, that can help you with all these things. But I had mentioned how some of us are just over exercising, and that can actually lead to even more cortisol dysregulation. And I think I had, by this time, I'd gone to mostly strength training and walking. So I wasn't really overdoing the types of exercise that I was doing. I used to run a lot, and I think I was overdoing it and, feeding into my cortisol dysregulation then. But one thing that I think was playing a huge role in my 3 a.m. wake ups was I was going to strength class at 5:30 in the morning, making sure I was up by 5 a.m. before the sunrise, almost always. And then I was going to the gym under these overhead, awful fluorescent blue lights, which basically was telling my body, holy crap, it must be the middle of the day. Like, we have all this bright blue light coming from overhead. It must be the middle of the day. And so what that does is, over time, it moves your wake up time back. It's called a phase shift. So phase shifting, it phase shifts your body into thinking the sun is up when it's not really up. And so I very rarely go to that 5:30 a.m. class anymore. If I do, I take my glasses with me, still not optimal, but I've allowed myself to just sleep and do my exercise a little bit later. I still wake up usually between 5:30 and 6 a.m. That's just my natural wake up time, but I'm not going under those awful fluorescent, overhead lights and, telling my body it's the middle of the day when it's not. So I think phase shifting played a huge role in my 3 a.m. wake ups. And I'd love to work with you individually if you want to learn more about that and, figure out what is happening for you. But once I started going to a little bit later strength training class, I know not everybody has that luxury. And there were so many things. I stopped going to that 5:30 a.m. class. Some parts of my business, I just very much relaxed on. I started to give myself a lot quieter mornings. So, I didn't go to the early exercise class. I'd walk a lot. I'd see sunrise. I prayed. I read my Bible. I moved the time back that I started working an hour later. Again, I know we don't all have this luxury, but if you can do things like this, they made a huge difference. Like how I started my day. I started my day with God. I started my day praying and reading the Bible and eating breakfast, and not like getting up and like going under like these bright lights and, going out and listening to a podcast where I had to like absorb so much information. Like the moment I got up, like if I go on walks now, I don't listen to anything except the nature sounds. So a lot of things changed, and all of a sudden I got out of that high alert nervous system dysregulation and started to sleep through the night. And I am just so thankful. I can tell, when I wake up in the middle of the night, like usually, I don't know if you're like this, but I can usually tell, like before I look at the clock, like about what time it's going to be. And it used to be for me, like I'd wake up and it was like 2:45 or it was 3:07. I'm like, oh crap. Like, and then I would just start getting all, oh, am I going to be able to go back to sleep? Or, I got to get up at 5 and I might, am I going to be able to sleep another hour? I don't know. Like, I just like start getting all stressed out and, thinking about things that were out of my control. And if I feel like that at all, I just start praying. And usually, almost always, I am falling back asleep. But more often than not, I might get up sometime in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Not always, but a lot of times I wake up and it's like 5:25 and I'm like, oh, hallelujah. Like it's a full night's sleep. I can't even believe it. And I do want to say too, if you're waking up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, but you're able to go back to sleep in 5, 10 minutes, like that's not a problem because sometimes you're just coming out of a sleep cycle, right? And it might be like, my sleep cycle ended and I woke up and I had to go to the bathroom, whatever. Where I can talk about that in another episode with the whole having to go to the bathroom. That rarely happens for me. Like I can usually go the whole night without having to go to the bathroom. But if you're able to go back to sleep in 5 or 10 minutes, 15, 20 tops, that's not really a problem. Like that could just be your sleep cycle. Where this becomes problematic is when you just go on high alert and this is happening all the time and you can't go back to sleep. That's where there's probably nervous system dysregulation. There's probably circadian disruption. I disrupted my circadian rhythm by that phase shifting, by, going to those early morning exercise classes. And I did not want to believe that was causing problems because like I was waking up early. I like to go and get my exercise done, but I like to fast throughout the morning. It was a lot easier than, even though I will talk about this later because I have a fasting episode coming up, but even though I didn't feel great, like I was always hungry throughout the morning. I'm always like, oh my gosh, I got to wait 4 more hours before I eat. Like I wasn't one of those people who was just like, oh, fasting's so easy for me. I never think about food. I never, want to eat anything. Like that was not the case for me. But I did it because I thought it was best for my health. And it was for a while. I just overdid it. So anyway, lots going on for the sleep. But like I said, you can work with me personally, individually. What I do when I work with people personally is I have them fill out a wellness intake form that's very thorough. So I can kind of see what you're doing, what your lifestyle looks like, what your goals are, and how we can come up with some solutions together. There's very rarely someone that I work with, especially in the last year, since I've really got a lot more tools in my tool chest, that I'm like, no, I don't think I can help you. Like usually there's things that we can work on and optimize to make you feel better. So just know too, in closing, again, we'll tap into adrenal fatigue and circadian dysfunction more next week. But this morning versus evening cortisol, like it should be high and peaking in the morning. That's what the sunrise is helpful for. It helps you to get cortisol going when it's supposed to and kind of shut that melatonin secretion off, and low at night. So if you're getting a second wind at night and all of a sudden 10 o'clock, you come alive like, oh, I'm a night hawk, 10 p.m. Oop, now I'm ready to go clean my house and, conquer the world. That's not a good thing. That's a sure sign of this circadian disruption and your cortisol's peaking when it shouldn't be. And I know for me, like if I'm out of my element, I'm not at home, not in my nighttime routine, I'm out, I will get that second wind. Like if I don't have my glasses on, I had a late dinner, I happen to be out with friends, which hardly ever happens. But if I am and I'm under bright lights, you get that second wind because you stimulate your cortisol and you deplete your melatonin production. So that's not you just being a night hawk. It's dysregulated circadian rhythm or circadian disruption. And there's ways to get around that. So I've linked a couple of my free guides in the show notes. The The sleep guide, the 3 a.m. wake up guide, I've linked to that. And I'm going to be talking more about my cortisol calm in the next couple of weeks because I will have that on special the week of Mother's Day. So if what I'm talking about is resonating with you and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is me. This course covers everything that you need to know to get your cortisol and melatonin and the rest of your hormones optimized. We talk about all the lighting stuff and all the sleep stuff. But we also talk about food timing, meal timing, what to focus on nutritionally, and then how to get that nervous system regulated again. There is a little bit on supplements, but that is not the main focus of my course because you don't have a supplement deficiency. You have some sort of circadian disruption going on if you have adrenal fatigue, adrenal dysfunction. That connection or the pathway, the communication along the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis is broken and it can be reestablished. So all these people who are running around support, like promoting cortisol cocktails and getting these huge followings and making all this money off of cortisol cocktails. Oh, it just drives me absolutely crazy because it's not the way to heal from these very disruptive diseases. It might help you temporarily or a little bit, but it's not the answer. So next week, we're going to dive into adrenal fatigue and circadian disruption even more. So be sure to tune in to that episode. And then also in a couple of weeks, look for that special Mother's Day promotion on Cortisol Calm. I'd love to get you in the course. You can do the course on your own, or you can add some personalized visits with me. Totally up to you. If you want to work with me individually, when you go and check out with the promotion, I'm going to be running $100 off my Cortisol Calm course the week of Mother's Day. When you check out, you can add the personalized visits in with me if you so choose, or you can do the course self-paced. And then, later, if you're like, okay, I need more help, you can always add the personalized package later. So hope you found this helpful. So many things that can be disruptive to sleep. But the good news is if there's so many things that can be disruptive, there are so many things that can be fixed. So I hope you learned a lot and I'll see you back next week.